It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 19th lecture of the Presidential Lecture Series. We started these lecture series in the year 2000 when I first became president of Queensborough for the purpose of bringing to your attention the level of quality that exists in the CUNY faculty community and in Queensborough community as well. And the purpose of these lectures are really precisely to do that, really to celebrate our faculty. To celebrate our faculty from the university at large, and in the fall semester, we have a lecture that we invite someone from another institution to come and speak to us. These are generally distinguished professors, or we invite someone who has something to do with CUNY and can advance, if you will, the mission of the university. We've had some wonderful speakers here. Names like John Mollenkoff, and if you know anything about demography, you know that he's one of the most quoted individuals in terms of demographics for New York City. We've had David Nassau, who wrote two wonderful seminal books. One is The Chief and the other one's Carnegie, and I recommend them to you. They're wonderful reads. Last year we had Michio Kaku, who is one of the string theory developers and who is really looked at as the Carl Sagan of physics, somebody who has taken a very complex theory of physics and has made it so that people can understand it, appreciate it, and he has a radio program and a TV program, and he was very exciting. And then in the springtime, we've had individuals from our own faculty who frankly, and I'm not biased, but frankly are as exciting and as stimulating as the ones that I have just mentioned. And I can mention a number of them. I know if I start mentioning names, I'm going to forget somebody, so I'm going to mention departments like art, chemistry, music, English, history, and today we have someone, again, from the history department, someone who I believe is a rising star in our institution, someone who came in, and it's unbelievable to me that she already has tenure, she already is an associate professor, and as you can see from the display, has written books about nutrition and the history of food. The title of today's lecture is Eating the Past, Why and How We Study Food History. And I believe that the combination of nutritional insight and obviously historical anthropological insight, it's a wonderful combination to understand history in a different way. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you, again, one of our rising stars, one of the wonderful professors of our history department, Dr. Megan Elias. Megan?
So, you can hear me? Everybody can hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that really kind introduction and for inviting me to do this. I've been looking forward to it actually all semester as a chance to just share with the college community and the wider community what I love to do, which is studying food history. And the title of the lecture is very grand. And I'm really, I don't know if I can tell you exactly why to study food history. What I thought I would do is give an example of how I study food history and hope that that can inspire all of you in all of your different disciplines to look at food and think about food. I'm hoping to make some converts here today, so I have a larger community to work with. So you're all going to have your minds changed, I hope. I wanted to talk first about how I got into this, and then to give an example, just to look at one meal, which is lunch, and to talk about how looking at the history of lunch shows you what food history can do, what looking at history through the lens of food or through the node of food or however you want to think about it can take you a lot of unexpected places and show you things about the past that you might not have noticed otherwise. So I have, for a couple years now, I've been talking about food at events, public events, and I keep finding myself saying, don't get me started talking about sandwiches. So I thought today I would really just talk about sandwiches and just give over my whole self to the sandwich talk. So that's what the whole lunch business is about. Also, lunch is interesting because it's a public meal. It's really the meal that we most often in contemporary society take in public, and that makes it noticeable, I guess. So how I got here, how I got to this sort of topic is through writing this book, which I only have one copy of, you can't have it, through writing a book about the history of home economics. Home economics was a movement to make the ordinary stuff of everyday life academic. So to bring the attention of scientists and scholars to home life, to food in home life, to bacteria, to relationships, to take the home as a serious subject of study. So I was writing this history about home economics, and in order to do that, I was reading a lot of cookbooks, and these were cookbooks that were designed as textbooks, which is an interesting concept. And I thought, well, I really need to understand how the women, mostly women, some men, who wrote these books about food, how they were thinking about food to understand their whole philosophy. So first of all, what do they think is food, right? What is edible and what is not edible? What do you not find in their cookbooks, and what do you find, and how is it treated? And I also found that my research was making me ravenous, really, really hungry. And I was sneaking snacks into archives, which is, wrong. You should never, ever do that, and I did it. I was not, exactly eating in the stacks, but close. It was terrible. And at the same time, I was reading other scholars who'd written about home ec, talking about how nutritionists had no sense of taste. And, home economists, domestic scientists, they just hated food. They wanted to suck all the pleasure out of food and just make people eat what was good for them. And I couldn't kind of square these two feet, this critique with my hunger. Either there's something really wrong with me, or there's something wrong with these critiques. So I thought I'd take a closer look at what we call the food ways of home economists. What were they? What was their cuisine? What was their idea about the proper way to prepare food? They were idealists, after all, so they're thinking, whatever they're thinking about food is they're thinking, this is the right way to do it. This is the perfect way to do it. This is the way we have to teach other people to do it. So I got into that, and here I was helped tremendously by a concept that was developed by one of CUNY's own, Dr. Anne Hauck Lawson, I always get this wrong, who teaches in the Food Science and Nutrition Department at Brooklyn College. And she developed this idea of the food voice, which is a really, really fun concept that I hope you take home with you and do something creative with. The food voice is the idea that the way we prepare food, the way that we buy food, the way that we present food is our own voice. So each one of us here has a food voice. So whatever we're doing with food is an expression of something about who we are, not just our culture, but our personalities as well. So I tried to sort of apply this idea of the food voice to home economists. Okay, so that got me thinking about American food. And then I was lucky enough to get to write this book, which is a history of just eating in the United States from 1890 to 1945. And it was in the process of writing that I was asked by the publisher to follow each meal. So a history of breakfast, which, I could also talk about for hours, and a history of lunch and a history of supper or dinner in America. And so I wanted to just zero in on lunch for today because, again, it is a public meal. And this lecture is oddly timed for a lecture about lunch. You've probably all had it already, so you have lunch memories. And we're moving into tea time, which will follow this, I guess. And tea time, of course, is a totally anomalous for Americans, a meal we don't usually take, but you're going to take it today because hopefully the talk will make you hungry. And there will be snacks afterwards. So, lunch. Okay. Lunch in America is a descendant, obviously, of lunch in Northern Europe. So this is not to say that there aren't other ways of thinking about lunch in American culture, but our kind of mainstream American foodways come from Northern Europe. So I wanted to start there and then kind of see what happened to lunch in America. And I have these good pictures. Okay. So I want to start with this one. You can see, this is a painting called The Harvesters. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art on the second floor to the left. You go in, you'll see it when you go in, and you'll look at it differently now, I hope. This is lunch in the 16th century. Here they are. They're sitting down to eat. These are peasants. They're harvesting wheat, and the wheat is going to be used to make white flour that they are never going to get to eat themselves. There was something called the hierarchy of bread in Europe in the 16th century, and the peasants who actually harvested the wheat ate much darker, denser grains, things like rye, primarily rye, barley, stuff that just doesn't have the right gluten to rise. So if you know the expression, the upper crust, is that like hopelessly out of date? That was from the elite got not only just the whitest bread and the lightest bread, but the top part of the bread. That was considered the best, the part that had risen the most, the upper crust. So if you're upper crust, you're the person who gets to eat that stuff. So they're not upper crust. They're sitting in the field having lunch. How do I know it's lunch? You can answer this. How do I know it's lunch? It's daytime. Yes, and there's still people working, right? So if it was supper, everybody would be somewhere else inside. If it's breakfast, they wouldn't be there either. So it's lunchtime, and the peasants in the corner are eating from a bowl. I don't know if you can tell that, but there are these bowls, and they're eating from them. They're eating pottage, which was just basically a stew like oatmeal. You put in it whatever you had. If you had some beans, you throw those in. If you had a little bit of meat, you were very lucky. You just throw some of that in. So they're eating pottage, and they're also, this is the good part, over here, this basket, this woman is cutting, there's a large loaf of bread and a cheese. So they're having cheese and bread and pottage, and then you really can't see this. But here in the middle, there's some pears. They're having cheese, bread, and pears. It's not that bad a lunch, if you think about it. It's actually very similar to the lunch I had myself today. And this is what they would have had. Where did it come from? They probably brought it with them in that basket, right? They brought it along with them, knowing they're going to need something in the middle of the day. And I just wanted to show you that cheese. So that's the cheese they would have been eating. This is probably, right? This is Edam cheese. It's made in the part of the world where this painting was also made. And it was the most popular cheese in the world for a couple of hundred years because it had a long shelf life, you could say, right? It lasted, and it especially lasted on long ocean voyages. So this is, I'm going to exaggerate here. This is the cheese that made it possible for Europeans to explore the rest of the world and eventually find America. That's a huge exaggeration. The cheese is responsible. Okay. And that lunch is very similar to this classic ploughman's lunch, which is the English, an English standard lunch. A cheese, a piece of bread, an apple, and in England, some kind of pickle, Branston pickle or some kind of tomato chutney. And that beer, that's also very important. It's important to the ploughman's lunch, and it's important to these guys. Let's see. Sorry about this, but up here, do you see this guy? He's tipping a big jug into his mouth. That's beer, most likely. Before the 19th century, before the discovery of bacteria, basically all people knew about water was that if it had been sitting out and you drank it, you would get sick. Whereas if you drank beer, you wouldn't get sick. In fact, you'd feel pretty good. So beer was the drink, right? Beer was what was safe to drink. And so workers drank beer. Everybody drank beer all day long. So that's what they've got in their jugs there. And we're going to get into talking about how that has changed. I did not have beer with my ploughman's lunch today. You'll be happy to hear. So the big question is, this is what the peasants are having. What about the guy who owns the fields? The guy who owns the fields and his lady and his family and his entourage are not eating lunch. Lunch is a meal that is needed by these guys because they're doing the work. But the man who owns the fields, the elite, the nobility, he's not eating lunch because he doesn't need to refuel. He's waking up late in the day and having something huge, right? Several barns worth of animals are going to be killed for his breakfast. And then lounging around, maybe having servants bring him snacks during the day, but not a meal. He doesn't have that midday meal that his peasants, his workers have. Then on to supper, a nice big supper in the evening. So lunch was something, it was a meal that was taken in midday by workers, by people who needed it. And that's all going to change, as you can see. Okay, so there's the plowmans again. And there's an actual plowman. I was really happy to find this picture. An English plowman about 1900 sitting in the middle of a field. And you can tell he's English because he's drinking tea, right? From nice cups in the middle of a field. Just such an English thing to do, such an English food way, right? So what happens is that Americans bring these foodways, not Americans, sorry, Northern Europeans bring these foodways with them when they come to America. And so all of those food customs, the eating the lunch in the field, the elite not stopping for a midday meal, but having breakfast, a huge breakfast, gigantic breakfast, food that would feed us for weeks at this point, and then having dinner, having supper, kind of followed with them as they crossed the Atlantic. And here's an image of a woman calling in field hands from the field to come in for their lunch. And then this is a picture of George Washington on his plantation. You may have seen this picture before. It's not painted by someone who is contemporary of Washington. It's painted in 1851. And it's Washington on his plantation. Right? So it's 1851. It's sort of pro-slavery propaganda. In the middle of the picture, you can see a woman has brought water to the enslaved workers who are working Washington's plantation. And this is how food would be brought out to agricultural workers. So free workers, people who hired themselves out, were often called back into a farmhouse for lunch. Unfree workers were fed in the fields. You want to get the most labor out of them that you possibly can. So you don't want them coming back and forth to lunch, basically. So this is how agricultural... Oh, is that for me? Oh, thank you.
Black one.
It's better. Okay, thanks. Is it better? Yeah, it's green. Okay. Do you want me to go back? Do the whole thing over? No. Okay, so there's the water. There's the guy drinking the water. This job, the job of carrying water out to the field on plantations, was often a job that was given to small children. It was often the first job that they got, the first time that they knew they were, in fact, enslaved, right? That they were laborers for somebody else. So you'd get 6-year-olds. Imagine trying to get a 6-year-old to carry a bucket of water. But this was done. Not these guys. These are obviously not enslaved workers, these little guys here. So food tended to come out to the field for agricultural workers for their lunchtime. In non-agricultural settings, food came in and out all throughout the day. So where you had workshops, the American colonies and then the American states had a fairly diverse kind of small-scale manufacturing economy in the Northeast. And there you would find workshops where craftsmen taught their apprentices how to make something. Clocks, chairs, tables, shoes, whatever they were making. They all made it together, and they all ate together throughout the day. So you had the woman of the house, who would be the craftsman's wife, coming in and out with meals. They did not sort of go off into her kitchen because her kitchen would be far too busy during the day. It was her own workshop. So she'd bring them food, usually something like the plowman's lunch, maybe a meat pie, and they drank. So that tradition of drinking beer throughout the workday continued not only in the agricultural setting, but inside workshops too. And so there was a kind of social feel and a familial feel to the workplace. So lunch was something that happened when everybody was ready for it. It didn't have a set time. You stopped to eat lunch when you got to a good finishing place, right? When everybody was ready for it, you'd stop and you'd have some beer and you'd talk, maybe even take a little snooze, and then continue with your work. So it was something, the whole pace of work, including lunch, was set by the workers themselves. And I have a little example here. I'm just going to show you guys the schedule, and then what I'd like to do is to read out the description, because you'll see what's happening here. Okay, so this is from a shipyard in New York City. So in our yard at 8:30 a.m., Aunt Arlie McVane, a clever, kind-hearted, but awfully uncouth, rough sample of Ireland, would make her welcome appearance in the yard with 2 great baskets, stowed and checked off with crullers, donuts, gingerbread, turnovers, pies, and a variety of sweet cookies and cakes. And so everybody in the shipyard stops. They've been at work since sunrise. It's now about 8:30, and they stop for all of these pastries. And she just shows up. She wanders in, and they all stop and they eat. The great quote here is, "No one ever hurried during cake time." So you take a little break. After this was over, we would fall to again until interrupted by Johnny Giogan, the English candy man, who came in always about 10:30. So that's only actually about an hour later. They've been having cake for an hour, and then they go back to work, and then they get the candy man. The candy man, these are grown men, by the way, right? The candy man comes in with an extension table slung before him, covered with all sorts of stick and several of sticky candy in 1-cent lots. So he's selling candy. They spend about 15 minutes to half an hour eating the candy. He goes out around 11 o'clock, and that's when you go out for the whiskey. So you stop around 11 o'clock for whiskey. You come back, who knows when. It's absolutely not clear from this testimony when people came back from whiskey. And then you work a little bit more, and then 3:30 they have cake lunch. So more cake. And that's provided by someone who's retired from working in the shipyard. So now he's making his living feeding cake or selling cake to former coworkers. And then about 5 o'clock, the candy man comes back in. You spend a little bit more time buying and consuming candy. And then sundown, everybody goes home to supper. So what's happening here? It sounds great to me, right? Doesn't it sound like a lovely work day? So people are constantly coming in and bringing food, and you get to eat some, and then you go on working. So it's like these pre-industrial workshops where there's always someone coming in. The food is coming in, and people are coming in with it. These characters appear with food. Johnny the Candyman, Aunt Arlie McVane with her cakes. So there's a kind of a fluidity to the workplace that ceases to exist with industrialization. So what's happening? This is from the 1830s. This is during a transitional period. Beginning in the 1820s in America, there's what I would call the Great Lunch Divide. So lunch changes dramatically. It changes when American manufacturing industrializes, when you start to see factories, when the quantity of goods that you produce is more important than the quality of goods. So factory owners, men who can invest in larger establishments and the machinery that runs these factories, what they produce is a workplace where workers are they're working to the pace of the machinery and not to the pace that's set communally. So you keep the machinery going, and the early factory machinery was run with water power. So as long as the river is running, the machines are running too. And you want to keep that production going. So this is a radical shift in lunch, among other things. What it means is that you want to shut all the machines off at the same time, right? And then start them up again at the same time. You don't want people wandering in and out. So lunch gets a time. It gets a moment when everybody has to go out and then everybody has to come back in. There's a bell that rings you out and a bell that rings you back in. And the lunch then is not something that's taken by everybody communally. It's the moment. The Great Lunch Divide is when the workers and the employers start having their lunches separately. And I'll show you. Okay, this is, as you can see, workers leaving the Pullman factory. This was a factory where Pullman cars were made for railroads in the town of Pullman in Illinois. This is about 1907. You can see the photographer's written noon hour on the picture. So what happened at noon, exactly at noon, was that the doors open and all the workers come out hungry for lunch, knowing they have to be back really, really quickly. And this is just because the factory owner wants to keep them working as fast and as long as he possibly can. So that casual lunch happens when we want it to happen, and with all these sorts of other characters, that just disappears. That's done. I'm sorry. I'm wrapping up. Okay. What what was unfortunate for these guys in the Pullman factory is that there was no cafeteria there, so they had to find their own lunch. And they go out into the street. There's a little wagon there, here, which it's possible this was a lunch wagon. This factory was surrounded, the roads around it were surrounded at lunchtime by wagons that sold food. I'm not sure that that one actually is, but it's in the right location for a Pullman lunch wagon to be. Other kinds of, okay, here, these are some food carts. So this is in Lower Manhattan around the same time, and these are just lunch carts that sprang up that never existed before industrialization. But they now provide a really quick lunch for somebody who's just getting out of the factory and going back into the factory and needs to be fed cheaply. So this is the beginning of the appearance of the lunch carts and the hot dog wagons and all that stuff that's so much a part of our urban landscape today. And also, not just lunch wagons, but saloons. So enterprising capitalists open up saloons. They open them up really close to factories so that you can get out of your factory and enter your saloon during the lunch hour. And they provide that mythical thing, the free lunch. So they put up signs in the window that say free lunch. You go into the saloon hungry in search of your free lunch, and they do indeed give you something. And what they give you is something very, very, very salty, right? So that you need to buy the beer, right? And buying the beer is not something you didn't want to do anyway, because in fact, working in the factories of the early industrial era, it was very tiring. It was very nerve-wracking. It was dangerous. It was boring. It was all of the kinds of things that a beer makes you forget quickly. Sorry to... it's true. It's true, though. So a place like this would bring in workers during lunchtime. And here's another one that I love, this picture. This is Garrity's Saloon. The guys out front are streetcar workers. So these are the guys who are running the street railroad. They stop for lunch at Garrity's. And it's a saloon, right? Its main business is selling beer. But the awning there says Garrity's Buffet. It's really a lunch place. Sure it is. You go in, you get your salty food. I mean, this is why the pretzels and the beer are such good friends, right? So that's what a free lunch is. And it is true that there is no free lunch, right? Unless you want to just eat a lot of salty food and then go back to work. Now, these establishments, these saloons with the free lunches, present a problem for women workers. So women factory workers were not supposed to go into saloons. Essentially, throughout the 19th century, if you were female and you set foot in a saloon, your reputation goes up in smoke, right? Unless you're there with a hatchet like Carrie Nation to destroy the entire place. But if you go in looking for lunch, you can forget any decent marriage proposal you were thinking of. I'm, again, exaggerating, but not by much. So what women have to do is they really just have to make do. They have to huddle. This is a great painting of women workers in Wagon, which is in England, near the industrial city of Manchester. They're having their lunch outside, right? The dinner hour. Dinner is the English term for lunch. So they're sitting outside. They've got their buckets with them. I'll show you a nice lunch bucket. There's her little lunch bucket. And some more lunch buckets. They were improvised. They were just pails, cans that were used for other things. That's a coffee can. Here's a cigar box. Pretty, right? You just stick a handle on it and you can take your lunch. This is a nice one. This is from much later, a photo from 1942 from Puerto Rico. And then this is maybe a more familiar look, right? And it's not till the 1950s, till 1954, that lunchbox start being made out of tougher material. They were made out of tin for a while, right? And then they got made out of a stronger material once somebody accidentally crushed his lunchbox. So a place like this is a kind of in between the open lunch cart and the saloon. And it's just about acceptable for a young woman factory worker to get her lunch from something like this. The owls, the lunch owls, started appearing in the 1890s. The first one, I think, was in Worcester, Massachusetts. And they're called owls because they were first provided to sell food to night workers, so people who've been working in factories all night and come out hungry. They're really more of a breakfast wagon to begin with. And that's something new, right? The ability to have your factory running all night long. What do you need for that? Electricity, right? You need the kind of lighting that isn't gonna, catch fire, right? Like candles. So this is the new world, right? The morning people coming off the night shift and wanting food. The owls then start showing up at lunchtime. The ordinary lunchtime, noon, and they develop, right? This is another nice little truck. This is from World War I, from Washington, to provide the huge numbers of people who came to Washington to work during World War I. I just like the name of it, that it was a noontime friend, that your sandwich is ready for you. And a lady, right? Ladies can respectably buy from these things. And this is a lunch truck that happens to be pretty dear to my heart. I ate a lot of disgusting food out of it while I was in college. We have our own lunch truck, right down on the edge of campus, which is also a great place. And I'm sure that if there are students here, you have formed your bond with that lunch truck. And if you give a lecture like this, you'll be showing your own. But I had to show Louise. I really did. Louise has milkshakes, hot subs, cold drinks, coffee, and cigarettes. Yes, you can get your cigarettes from the truck. Okay, now this is the opposite, right? So when the workers start going out for this very limited lunch break, and they have to come back as quickly as they can, the owners have a whole different lunch culture. So the owners no longer are sitting with their workers and sharing their beer and sharing their bread and sharing their cheese together. The owners are now socializing with each other. They have nothing to do with the workers, right? They're not responsible for their moral character anymore. They're not training them up to be professional equals. They're just separate. So the factory owners can now hang out together. This is a picture of Delmonico's, which is the most famous of this kind of lunch place in New York and maybe even in the world. It was established by some Swiss immigrants, and it was established to serve the owning class. This is a special event, obviously, and this is a menu from a similar special event at another place, which was the Union Club. What kinds of things are they eating there? Fancy stuff, right? Stuff that you can't just get out of that little van. You couldn't pull a broiled spring chicken or a grouse out of the Noontime Friend, right? This needed a little bit more preparation. There are sandwiches, as you can see. But it's kind of grand. And it's also, as you can see from all the bottles all over the table, it's liquor-soaked, right? It's not just a pint of beer, it's wine, it's brandy, it's all of this stuff. And why is it that way? Because these guys don't have to go back to work. It doesn't matter when they go back to work, right? They're just enjoying each other's company. They're not essential, really, to the running of their factories. They've hired, by this point in 1876, they're hiring managers to do the managing for them, to tell the workers when, to ring the bell to bring them back in from lunch. And what develops in the 19th century over lunch is this push and pull over the issue of drinking during the daytime. It's okay for these guys, they feel, to get drunk at lunch. It's practically a responsibility. But for the workers to go out to the saloons and get a little relaxed with a pint of beer, maybe 2 or 3, is not okay, because when they come back into the factory, they mess things up, right? And not only things, themselves, right? They lose a limb in a machine, or they knock over somebody else's work. So factory owners, these guys get really concerned with the drinking habits, the lunchtime specifically, lunchtime drinking habits of their workers. And they start pushing coffee, which is the opposite, right? So they're pushing coffee for the workers and not at all for themselves. They're meanwhile enjoying this. You didn't know this was a political lecture, right? Okay, let's see. So here's another, this is a more modest menu. This is the kind of place that men of the managerial class would go out to for lunch. And how can you tell it's a male restaurant? Cigars, exactly, right. The cigars. The oysters, too, are pretty male. They're considered a pretty male sort of food in the 19th century, though most people ate oysters at some point in America. But yeah, the cigars and tobacco, that really gives it away, that this is a man's place. So again, there's a new class emerging, the managerial class, and some of them are women. But they can't go to places like this. So there have to be new kinds of establishments. Oh, this is not for the managerial class. Okay. Another thing that's happening then is that the ownership class, right, the men who own the factories, their wives are now finding themselves alone during lunchtime. And lunch was really never a meal that women took in the 18th century when women were much more involved in production in the household. They're making stuff all day long. They're eating a little bit of dinner while they're cooking it, but they're not sitting down and stopping and taking what we would now in the 21st century call me time or anything as indulgent as that. So then in the second half of the 19th century, as men leave the workplace, leave the home, and have this kind of public lunch life, women are left behind. Middle-class women are left behind. And another thing that's leaving them alone at home is public education. So their kids are more and more often out of the house. They don't have children to look after. And so the middle of the afternoon becomes this very female time at home. They start inviting their friends over and preparing meals that are especially for women. So you get a lot of things like this and this. Very delicate. And there are a lot of people who are extremely critical of this cuisine. I mean, it really is a specific cuisine, middle-class women's lunch food. And what they don't think about, which is something that I've started to write about, is that these are women who are alone at home, but dining with other women, so they can have this specific aesthetic for themselves. They're showing off to other women, hey, look what I can do. And Jell-O, by the way, was this fantastic new food technology that people had not been able to do this before, to suspend vegetables like that. Wow, it was amazing. Look, is it there? Is it not there? It was like magic. So they're showing off their skills to their friends. And something essential to remember about middle-class 19th century American women is that they wore corsets. They wore corsets that were like cages squeezed around their middles all day long. And when you wear one of these things, it's hard to eat, right? It's hard to digest. It's not healthy at all. So to slip a little Jell-O down the gullet, right, would be much less trouble, much less later discomfort than some of this stuff, the small steak or the liver and bacon that men are eating at the same time. And that's something I think it's really worth thinking about as you think about food. Always remember, what are people doing during the day, and what do they have to wear, right? What are their physical constraints on what they can eat? So this is a lovely Jell-O salad. This is the kind of thing you would serve to a friend. I have a nice little menu from a cookbook I found in the Schlesinger cookbook collection, which is up in Massachusetts. This is probably one of my favorite lunches. Okay, this is a cookbook that has a section for lunch, and this is described as a lunch menu for a few friends, with the idea, of course, it would just be women friends. What you get if you go over to this woman's house is peanut wafers, sponge cake, chocolate with whipped cream, and pineapple lemonade. It's like a kid's fantasy of lunch. It's all sweet and light and fluffy and pretty food. So this is the kind of stuff that women are doing at home as the men are out having cigars and eating oysters. Their food culture's totally divided, right? The food of the one is anathema to the other. For those women who are not at home, who are out in public, who are working as secretaries, there have to be safe places. This is a wonderful Edward Hopper painting. You've probably seen it before, but I'm hoping I'm giving it a new context. This is Tables for Ladies. Restaurants would advertise this exactly. We have tables for ladies. It allowed young women who were kind of struggling up into the middle class, it allowed them to think that they could be safe in the restaurant. Women were very afraid of what would happen to them if they went into restaurants. Would strange men talk to them, right? Would they sit down at the table with them? Would men see them eating food, right? Would this be unattractive? And, some of these concerns sort of linger if you check out women's magazines lately. So this is a safe space, the idea that there's a place where a lady can eat unmolested. And that was the word that was often used to describe these spots. This is a nice one. This is Sylvias Sweets Tea Room. This is from Brockton. And again, it's advertising that kind of ladylike fare, the light stuff, the sweet stuff. And that's not something that a lot of the young women who probably went to this place, it's a sort of aspirational cuisine for them, those peanut wafers and pineapple lemonade of the middle-class ladies' cookbook. But they could find a kind of a cheaper imitation in a place like this. Now, another thing that happens towards the end of the 19th century is that those women who have all this, the middle-class women who have suddenly all the free time, start using it to go out. And they find that they've got a new role in society, which is shopping. So they start going to the new department stores that are created just for them, right? Great big palaces of pleasure and consumption. So they go to these shopping places, and the owners of the department stores start to discover that there's a problem. Women get hungry shopping, and they leave. So they go out to a place like Sylvias Sweets. So what you want to do if you own a department store is keep them inside, give them a little snack, and then hope that they will get back to the shopping. You know these places, right? These were some of my favorite places as a child. There was one in Bloomingdale's that I thought was heaven. Do you remember 40 Carats?
Gordon Taylor's The Bird Cage.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and people have very strong feelings about these places. This is the Wanamakers Tea Room. If any of you are from Philadelphia, you're dying now, right? So this is a place for a lady to stop in for a little bite, and then she continues her shopping. They're often really kind of buried in the store so that you can't get out afterwards. You know, you've had your food and you're still stuck in the maze of the department store. Here's a menu. I don't know if you can see that very well. There are eggs. There's chicken broth. There are lobster croquettes. Croquettes were the food for ladies around the turn of the century. It's basically chopped up stuff with breadcrumbs and some egg fried up into a little delicate thing. We don't eat croquettes anymore, by the way. Dry toast. I mean, it's all pretty light stuff. And then there's a nice big section of, how does that work? Green thing, come on, help me. Okay, there we go. Donuts, ladyfingers, macaroons. What is that? Euchred figs, chocolate eclair, all of this stuff. Raisin cake, tutti frutti, cocoa. Again, very sweet, light stuff. Occasionally you'll find a steak on a menu like this, but not too often. There's tongue there, a little heavy. Small portions, yeah. So don't be afraid. You're not going to get tired. You're still going to have shopping power left at the end of the day. So again, the worlds of lunch are really diverging in the late 19th century. And then this happens, right? World War II. In World War II, as I'm sure you all know, it was necessary for for the economy, for national security, to replace men who had left to fight in the war with women factory workers. So all of a sudden, lots and lots of women leaving the house every day to do the exact kind of work that women weren't supposed to do, heavy lifting. And this is like one of the most famous pictures from the era, right? What I care about in this picture today, most of all, is this. What is it? A sandwich. Is it dainty? No, it's not at all, right? It's a hefty sandwich. It's more like the Plowman's, big chunks of bread and maybe some meat, maybe some cheese. This is not a lady's sandwich at all. And here are, whoops, too many clickers. There they are. The real Rosies. So these are some women who worked in San Francisco what are they making there? I mean, they've got their visors on. I'm forgetting what they actually make. Building ships, right, in San Francisco, of course. Thank you. They've got some sandwiches, and they've got their thermoses and their big, heavy lunch boxes. They're just sitting on the floor, right? Think about the difference between that and that. But it's ladies. How can it be? It is because it was necessary, right? All of these gender assumptions that make the Wanamakers Tea Room happen have to be put aside momentarily, right, briefly, to build the airplanes, to build the ships. So we set that aside. And all of a sudden, this is a great moment for reading American cookbooks. You suddenly find all these chapters about sandwiches. And people hadn't really cared about sandwiches before, but suddenly it's this whole category, right? You have to make sandwiches to go in the lunch boxes to take to the factory. Some factories provided food. They provided food on special carts that were brought around just, to make sure that factory workers didn't leave the premises at any time, so they stayed there. And you can see these women are staying there to eat their lunch. These are also some wartime workers. And again, it's a very different picture of eating. They're just shoving that food into their mouths, right? There's nothing very delicate about them. Are they drinking beer? I wish. I wonder, I think it's a soda fountain, but let's say they're drinking beer. So we get this fabulous book. This is a little bit later, but it's the Sandwich Manual. We all need the Sandwich Manual, I think, right? And you start to see in the 40s, when people are writing about sandwiches, an assumption that men and women like different kinds of sandwiches, which, from the picture of Rosie, you don't get that at all. She's eating a man's sandwich. She's doing a man's job. But you start to see columns, male sandwiches, female sandwiches. Men were supposed to like meat sandwiches, and women had all these sandwiches that don't exist anymore. They exist, but people don't eat them. Things like chopped dates and cream cheese, or a walnut spread with lettuce. And there's always this idea that women only like this light, dainty stuff, which by the 40s, they're not as constrained physically. They don't have the corsets on anymore. It's possible to eat a good meat sandwich. I wanted to give an example. Oh, I'm running out of time. See, I could talk about sandwiches forever. Okay, this is from a school. So this is actually in 1925, a little earlier. There was a kind of flurry of excitement about sandwiches when sliced bread was invented. As you can imagine, in the early 20s, people really thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and started thinking about once you get a loaf of bread that's sliced, you know exactly how many sandwiches are in your future. So if you think about it, that's a pretty powerful knowledge to have. So this is from a manual about school lunches. Boys like heavy meat sandwiches thickly cut, while girls prefer jam, lettuce, and cream cheese sandwiches daintily served. So this was the assumption about the two. And unfortunately for the boys, this doesn't really take into account the metabolism of the youngster, that eating a great big heavy meal in the middle of the day might not be so good for Junior when he goes on to try and study math, that maybe the lighter lunch of the girl is going to give her an advantage. But I am, as you know, not a nutritionist at all. It's just a guess. Okay, I'm going to finish now. Sorry. In the 20th century, lunch has been politicized in a couple of different ways. You'll know what I mean. So during the Depression, many children were only getting their meals from their schools. And teachers noticed this, especially home economists, home ec teachers, realized that for many families, the only meal that the school child was getting was the meal that the school was providing. So they became very interested in the nutrition of that meal, and they became very interested in spreading the school lunch program. Eventually, in 1946, there is a National School Lunch Act. So every child is supposed to have access to a cheap or free lunch. This becomes incredibly complicated because the school lunch program is also set up to deal with surplus agricultural stuff. And so what the school lunchroom is getting to make the lunches out of is whatever the farmers have too much of. And if you've been keeping up with food news recently in America, you know that mostly what farmers have too much of is corn. So we see a lot of overuse of corn and corn syrup in lunches up to today as well. So there's a federal school lunch act that's supposed to feed hungry kids. And there's these moments, right, which you've seen again and again and again, but it's lunch, right? All they want is to have lunch. This is probably the most fraught lunch, right? So this is in Jackson, Mississippi in 1963, a sit-in, just for the right to have lunch. And it's something that was mentioned a lot by servicemen when they came home from World War II, African-American servicemen who had fought, in the war for America, fighting fascism. They came home, and many of them remembered after the war going to have lunch and not being able to get lunch. And then that not getting lunch was such an affront. So it's not, I think, accidental at all that this happens in a public daytime space, that it's not a coincidence that the sit-ins happen at lunch counters. And here's an incredible picture. This is in Raleigh, North Carolina. Rather than serve African-American patrons, they took the seats off the stools. No lunch for anybody, right? If they can't have just white lunch. And then, oh yes, okay. So by the 1950s, there's this culture of the three martini lunch, right? The knowledge worker, somebody who doesn't have to do any heavy lifting, can just go out and get plastered every day for lunch. And Mad Men, the AMC TV series, really celebrates this culture. It's an interesting show because it shows that culture kind of on the wane. And there's a scene from Mad Men that is far too disgusting for me to show you, but I'm going to describe it, which would be even worse. These two characters are knowledge workers. They're ad men, right? So all they have to do is have brilliant ideas, and they can be drunk while they're doing it. It's a great job. So they go out for lunch, and there's some personal stuff between them that I won't get into, but they're challenging each other to eat more and more and more oysters. And they eat and they eat and they eat. And they can do this, right? Because they don't have to do any heavy work. Then they go back to their office to meet a client, and the elevator's broken. And they have to climb 26 stories up in the stairs. When they get to the top, one of them, Roger, pukes. It's disgusting. But he does because he's eaten the wrong lunch for the kind of behavior that he suddenly has to perform. It's a very interesting moment for a lunch historian, but really, really gross. So you're happy I didn't show you, right? And this is the kind of thing that they're having. I won't bore you with another menu. Okay, this place. So this is the kind of place where that culture continues, the lunch where you get to show off how much time you can spend having lunch. And then one last radical shift. I hope it works. Otherwise, I'll just tell you. No? It doesn't like to? It's not going to. Sorry, I set it up, but it's the movie Wall Street, which is about the new work culture of the 80s. Go, 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 right? No relaxing. And it's the great line. Who knows what it is? Do you know what Gordon Gekko says? Gordon Gekko is the hero or the anti-hero. Yeah. Before greed is good, he's on the phone with somebody, and, oh, don't worry about it, I can act it out. Yeah. I've been practicing. He's on the phone with somebody, he's making all these deals, he's spending and losing millions of dollars in half a second, and he's on the phone with someone and he says, lunch is for wimps. So this whole new culture, and this, I think, is the kind of culture that we're living in today, that to be seen stopping for lunch is to show that you've stopped moving for a minute, right? You're not making the killing that you're supposed to be making. And so that's really been a kind of pervasive idea, people eating at their desks to show that they're not slacking off. More corporations putting in lunchrooms so that people aren't leaving the premises. They can just grab something and keep going. There's a really funny little graphic of this little guy, right? I think we've all been this sorry sack at some point. And then this last thing I wanted to leave you with, which is a new movement about school lunch, which is the edible schoolyard movement started by Alice Waters, who's a famous chef out in Berkeley, California. And it's a movement that's kind of spreading across the country to get away from the reliance on agricultural surplus for school food, to combat childhood obesity, to make everything better, basically, as far as Alice Waters is concerned, to grow your own lunch. So while I would not suggest that you all have to grow your own lunch, I would urge you to enjoy it, right? And to know that it's not for wimps. Okay, so thank you very much for coming in. I think there are... Oh, you can ask questions.
Isn't she great? Another round, please. How wonderful is to take a topic and it brings out so many different issues, from politics to relationships at home to economics. Really wonderfully done, Megan. I thank you so very much for that very, very wonderful lecture. Before I start, open the floor for questions, and I know there are going to be a lot of questions. And I am going to try to do a Phil Donahue. Those of you who remember Phil Donahue, try to give you the microphone. But I want to ask the members of the committee who chose Megan to give us this wonderful lecture to please stand and be recognized. Dr. Gillespie. These are the people who had the idea, and help me determine who is going to be the speaker. I also want to ask the people who have spoken before. Those of you who have given presidential lectures, please stand. I know Suzanne is here. Well, I am certain the other ones are plugged in via the internet and are eating their lunch while they are watching Dr. Elias with their wonderful lecture. I will open the floor to questions. I know that a lot of you are hungry, and there are going to be some refreshments outside, but let's start out with you.
What a question I've been once before. Everyone started drinking beer in the Middle Ages instead of water because they knew it was contaminated. Explain what the reasons for that was.
Oh, why beer is better than water?
They were drinking beer instead of water because it was healthier to drink beer than water.
Yeah, because beer, it uses water, but I have a former student here who could probably answer this question, but I won't put him on the spot. To make beer, you have to boil water, so it becomes sterilized in the process. And then beer is alcohol, right? And alcohol prohibits the growth of bacteria. So it's safe. And it was nutritious, too. I mean, it has a little bit of nutrition. I don't want to push that issue too much, but it's... it made people feel healthy, and water made them feel sick, right? And it did
Dr. Klingen?
But the corrections are coming.
Dr. Klingen?
Megan, you touched a few times in your talk about the relationship between sleep cycles and meals. And I just want to ask a question. In a time when artificial lighting was expensive and rare, many people go to bed at sundown and then they would rise in the middle of the night for maybe 2, even 3 hours. To what degree was this most private of meals a midnight snack institutionalized and then lost over time?
I don't know. There's a wonderful book called The Watches of the Night that just came out about life during the night. And I really don't know about nighttime meals because they don't appear in cookbooks unless they're on-purpose midnight suppers, which are very trendy at the turn of the century. Those kinds of meals were like the women's lunches of the 18th century, that they're just kind of snatched. That's sort of the essence of the midnight snack, right? It's not something you plan. You don't shop for your snack, or I don't want to presume, right? In general, I haven't read about people making a shopping list that includes their midnight snack. It's usually what you eat, what's left, right? And often what you didn't permit yourself to eat during the day, right? The ice cream. I'm just talking about the ice cream.
I think it's also, yeah.
I know from reading documents from Regency England, besides just Jane Austen, that the middle class, the gentry, the upper class would sometimes partake of luncheon.
Right.
And I'm wondering I never could figure out what it was, either how it related to luncheon or what they were eating, because they never specify.
Yeah, it's a peculiar word, and the whole etymology of the word of lunch, it has a lot of different possible ancestors, like most important words. We don't know quite where it came from. So luncheon is a kind of a formal thing. The meals that they're eating are probably the first meal of the day for them. It's just a big thing, like lots of roast birds and pies and meat pies, and all that kind of stuff. So luncheon would be something that was more a more kind of planned affair, right? It wasn't something that just happened every day, like dinner, which happened for workers every day, but not for her class, right? Yeah, I've just been rereading Jane Austen, looking for all the food in it.
And luncheon, it starts with an N.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so that's one of the possible ancestors for it. That's from the 16th century, from Germany, a kind of a noon eating. But the other possible ancestor for lunch is loncha, is a Spanish word. Forgive my terrible pronunciation, but I need to say the j part for it to make sense how it's an ancestor, which means slice. And so just like the slice that you eat during the middle of the day. And you have to remember stuff like sandwiches, the whole mythology of the sandwich, that it's invented by the Earl of Sandwich. That's something he was eating during a card game. So not sitting down, definitely not at noon, probably at 3 o'clock in the morning. And we know the actual existence of sandwiches predates everything. I mean, if you've just had a Seder, you know from your Hillel sandwich that they've been around before any earls got to eating them. Yes.
There used to be, I guess there still are, stores called luncheonettes.
Yes, yeah.
And now that I think of it, I realized there were no tables.
Right.
It was just family service.
Yeah.
So it had to be a fast lunch.
Right.
And that was a luncheon.
Yeah, there's a whole.
Did you all hear that?
Oh yeah, so he's asking about the luncheonette, those places where there's a counter and the little stools, and you can kind of perch and then leave, and there are no tables to sit down. A little luncheon place. Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. So there's this whole history of the object of the place where you eat lunch, going from those wagons to people using old train cars, and then other people just thinking, oh, train travel is so glamorous. People really used to think that. I'm just going to make my restaurant look like a train car to attract customers. So there's some of it is actually old train cars used because they're cheap, and then others are imitation because trains themselves were glamorous. But all places you could get in fast, get out. They're cheap, right? There's not a lot of overhead to the luncheonette. You don't have to put out the tablecloths or hire the chef. And you can see the person cooking the food, so you know just how fast they're moving. You know that you can get in and get out. So the rushed lunch just gets faster and faster and faster through the 20th century. There used to be these ads on TV, which I think they took away probably because I was so enraged by them. These little like cups of something that people were supposed to knock back for lunch. I think it was soup. But there was no way you could have heated it. Do you remember these things? And it was always women shown eating them. That women are too busy to have lunch, and they just drove me crazy because nobody's too busy for lunch.
I'm certain some of the students are here, and they're probably thinking about when did McDonald's begin, and what is the history of fast food and its relationship to luncheon?
Right. Do they have to? Yeah. Okay. So fast food comes with the highways, basically, right? Once people are traveling by car, they need to eat. People open up little places where you can, again, get in, get out, go on your journey. And the standardization of them is because of travel, right? So instead of traveling from state to state to state and just taking your chance with Moe's Luncheonette or, Megan's Pie Shop, who knows what you're going to get there. If you've seen the establishment, Howard Johnson's was one of the first. If you've seen it in your state and you see it in the next state, you know what it was like in your state, so you're going to be safe with it. It's a fear of difference, right? It's the fear of eating something that's going to make you sick, right? And paradoxically, it often makes you sick.
Every once in a while, I've been, although I don't look it, been talked into going into an afternoon tea.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, does that have any correlation to lunch, or is that an entity all to itself?
Yeah, that's its own meal. And I would be happy to give another lecture about tea. Yeah, and I think I was talking about this, earlier this week to my class. We were talking about the American Revolution and the importance of tea. Tea time is something that you could afford or not afford, right? So it was sort of a way to show class, to show status. I can stop in the middle of the afternoon, and somebody else can do my housework while I pause and refresh myself and have a little cake, and it's really a wonderful thing. But it definitely is not just a meal; it's a performance too. And as you know, if you've been to a professional tea place, right, there are all these rituals and what you can have and what you can't have, and you're probably one of the few male people there because it's associated with a woman's day. And there are very different, a very different kind of history of tea for the working class in England. There's a wonderful book called Sweetness and Power that talks about the history of sugar and the use of very, very sugary jam and sugar in tea to get workers through the last part of the day. So that it's a complicated issue. But so you ventured out of your gender territory when you went to the tea room. Yeah. And those tea rooms were meant to be safe spaces from people like you, you know? Sorry.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, are there countries in the world today, Professor, that really have no lunch tradition any longer? I would say countries that are not as industrialized as the United States, perhaps.
I bet there are. I mean, I really don't know about this, but lunch, the specific time, the kinds of things you're expected to eat, it's very much tied to industrialism. And before that, it just happened, before Europeans came to America, people who lived here didn't have set meal times. They had a bubbling pot of something going, and you just stopped in and ate it when you felt like eating it. The idea of meal times, of cutting up the day like that, is very modern. And yeah, there probably are. You should become an anthropologist and find out and tell me. Yes, okay, good. That was easy.
One more.
Thank you. In some countries, especially Europe, the lunchtime meal is like a full meal.
Right.
And then in the evening, you just have a salad or something light.
Right.
We're doing it a little different.
Yes, we are. It's part of the sort of, well, some of us are doing it differently, and some of us aren't. You get the upper class who had, by the 18th century, American upper class is having a great big breakfast and then a great big dinner, and then they kind of just add in a great big lunch. But it's in general, the kind of the big lunch and the lighter supper is it's more and that has to do with ideas about leisure and work, and whether it's like, how do you say this, like whether it's appropriate to talk about work, and the kind of the sense of democratization in America, that okay, everybody should have a dagwood on every plate, that kind of idea. There are very different styles, different food ways in Europe and different parts of Europe. There's that whole issue about how come French women don't get fat. They talk about the little meals. And our big meals are part of our idea about ourselves. We can do it. We have a lot of land. We can raise all those cows, and then we can eat all those cows all at the same time. It's this kind of, but it's a really interesting concept that.
Ooh, I said one more, but I'll give you one more, and that's it.
The time frame you covered, Megan,
like
1890 on, is also the time when the medical community and the public became more aware of bacteria.
Yes.
And since lunch is a meal that you generally have no say in terms of its preparation, was there any...
I do.
Well, no, with more and more people eating off vans and trucks and cars. Was there any kind of coming together of those two forces where people would discourage the eating of out because of the awareness of microorganisms, which was becoming more and more...
Definitely. But at the end of the 19th century, people are really obsessed with germs, and that's another reason that the luncheonette has the open kitchen. The idea that if you can see the guy making the lunch, it's going to be clean. That's not true, right? But it's just going to... this appearance of cleanliness. That's also why people were so excited about sliced bread and packaged bread. And this has really changed lately. Everybody in New York, at least, so excited about the artisanal loaf, and you can see the thumbprint of the baker in it. At the end of the 19th century, you did not want to see the thumbprint of the baker because it was dirty. You wanted it plastic and perfect. And it's the same kind of thing with the chain restaurants, the fast food restaurants, that it's all exactly the same and it's all shipped together, hermetically sealed. Yeah, so that definitely the fear of germs affects our food aesthetic, really. And then it's switching back. People want the dirtiness of the farmer's market carrots, or.
All right, I'm going to be bad. One more, and then that's it.
Please stop.
You.
Yes, my question relates to his in terms of there's a lot of talk on the internet about having a better, bigger lunch in terms of comparing to dinner. I was curious from a nutritional standpoint, because they say, with the dinner, there's a lot of calories that can go over into the night. Is it better to have a bigger, better lunch than, a small dinner?
I have no idea. I'm not a nutritionist at all. I mean, I only know what I've read from 1930s nutritionists, what they were saying, and they tested stuff on rats, and I don't know. I don't know if it. I I'm not qualified to give any advice. I think there are people in the room who are qualified to give that kind of advice, and you can ask them.
Well, that's going to be the next lecture.
Yeah.
We have some refreshments outside. Please join me in thanking Dr. Elias for a wonderful lecture. I also believe that this is an example of why scholarship is so very important in community college education. Imagine what the students are getting when they are in class and they are talking to Dr. Elias about history, and some of them say anything about food, and suddenly there she goes. So thank you so very, very much.
I also have a book.
And if you want to buy the book, it's right here.
I will sign it, but it's very expensive, so don't bother. Thank you so much. It was really a treat. I really value that.